much to the organizers for inviting me. Many of you have far more years of experience in schools, and I appreciate you trying to get the ideas of some young educators into the discourse. So thank you for inviting me. First question about my background. I moved to India about 6 years ago to partner with a group called Eaton House in Singapore, along with a gentleman who was running the Times of India. And together we started an education group focused on early childhood education, which we thought was very neglected compared to the importance it should have, especially with leading brain research. And we've set up about 55 early childhood education centers around India and are now exploring what would be world-class K-12 education. That's my background. On the question you asked, I think there's 3 fundamental things we must do in schools today. The first one, now I don't know if we call this innovation or we talk about going back to fundamental basics and values and roots. And what I mean by that is I think we're all CEOs of education groups, with all the brands that are coming, with all the hype that is coming, the most important experience for learning is the interaction between a child and a teacher. And I think we should go back and think about how do we view children? Do we view them as simple, sweet, cute things? Or do we look at children as innately capable with great possibility, and therefore how do we interact with them? How do we look at teachers? Is it the last job of choice without respect? Or can we learn from models such as those in Scandinavia where the teacher is so respected, so well paid, and it's really the profession of choice? So one thing I think is fundamental is this innovation in how we look at children and teachers, or is it going back to some basic traditional value? So when you ask me about innovation, I don't think it's just thinking about fancy technologies. I think innovation is about thinking of new paradigms of thought, and this is one fundamental one for me. A second, which Dr. Lulla talked about, is around knowledge economy. Anmol and I were on a panel yesterday morning on a conference called One Globe. And there was a number of speakers. Minister Salman Khurshid was speaking, Mr. Anurag Thakur was speaking, people from the World Bank, the IMF. The common theme across all conversation is we are a services economy predominantly, and we are moving towards a knowledge-based society increasingly, both in terms of what we do, as well as how we do it in the jobs that we have. Knowledge is everywhere. In that circumstance, what does it mean as educators to have capable people who can work in a knowledge economy? And I think we all talk about it on the surface. I'd like to draw from an example of a company which I respect deeply, where I spent many years, who focuses on developing knowledge, people who can work with knowledge, and that's McKinsey & Company. And they try and understand problems, dissect problems, analyze problems, collaborate and communicate to solve problems, and to get stakeholders involved into action. Now, this kind of person who's going to be successful in the 21st century, what does that mean in terms of schools and what we need to do in terms of pedagogy? And maybe later in the panel we can talk about that, but I think innovation in pedagogy and thinking about how do we create inquirers and critical thinkers who can think critically, collaborate effectively, communicate well, have character and values, and work across cultures. I think these are fundamental elements that we need to think about in pedagogy. I'm not saying we should do away with everything that we have. The CBSE, the ICSE, these are systems which give very solid learning outcomes. How we go about teaching those learning outcomes gives us a lot of flexibility in what we can do. So that's the second area I think we need to innovate. And the third, I think many of us and the schools we run are expensive schools catering to a more upper middle class. And we felt it was important to create an aspirational brand to reinvest what we make to scale this organization. But the reality is the bulk of our country is not in elite schools. How do we talk about issues of quality in primary education? How do we talk about issues of access in secondary education? How do we think about improving critical thinking and advancement in university? I think we need to innovate our delivery models to think about how do we get to the mass of India, which needs improvement in education more than anyone else. And I think there's models of low-cost private schools, which are innovations. I think there's models of technology, and I don't think technology is just putting a computer in the classroom. As educators, I think we need to think, what is the learning outcome? How does technology play a role in supporting that learning outcome? And for examples, we don't need to have books going everywhere. There's very inexpensive laptops where you can have a lot of this material. So I think, Anmol, the point is delivery models, especially for access, we can really innovate around. The last point I'll make, I think I'm going over time. The overall question, can we afford not to innovate? I stood up, Dr. Lula, I think as many of us did, because fundamentally why all of us are here is what happens if we don't innovate? Well, then children who are so innately capable with potential are not reaching their basic potential which they're capable of. Children who should have access don't have access. What does it mean to be a free country, but with that freedom, we're not able to do anything with it because we don't have the education to feed ourselves or to do something productive with ourselves? So if that's the opportunity cost of not innovating, I don't think we have a choice. And if we allow models of innovation, I think the world is our oyster. It may take time, some things will work, some things will fail. But further down the line, I think we will have new solutions to very fundamental problems.